Assalomu alaykum muhtaram konferensiya ishtirokchilari, Your Excellencies, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to welcome you in the capital city of Uzbekistan at the opening of the International Conference of Regional Cooperation among Central Asian States of the Joint Plan of Action for the Implementation of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy. First of all,
Найдите, пожалуйста, программу, он ее распечатывал.
of this important high-level event, and especially to Under-Secretary General, Head of the UN Office of Counterterrorism, His Excellency Vladimir Voronkov, for personal participation at the as well as to the Secretary General of the OSCE, Her Excellency Ms. Helga Maria Schmidt, and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Central Asia, Head of the United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, Ms. Natalia German, for the video address to the participants of the conference. The Global Counterterrorism Strategy, unanimously adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2006, is a unique document aimed at strengthening the national, regional, and international efforts to combat terrorism. By adopting this document, the world community for the first time agreed on a unified strategic framework for countering common threats. 11 years ago, on November 30, 2011, the states of General Asia adopted the world's first joint action for the implementation of this strategy in the region. Thereby, they declared their commitment to take concrete collective measures to combat terrorism and became an example of the implementation of the global counterterrorism strategy in the regional level. Over the past years, the countries of the region have taken important steps towards the implementation of the joint plan, especially in preventing the spread of the ideology of extremism and the threat of terrorism in our region and at the global level. Today's conference is being held in Tashkent on the initiative of the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, announced at the 75th session of the UN General Assembly. Its objective is to render a new impetus to multilateral cooperation in the fight against the threat of extremism and terrorism. The relevance of this conference is that it provides an opportunity to analyze the accumulated experience of interactions between the countries of the region under an umbrella of the joint plan and consider the most important prospects for strengthening cooperation in the face of new challenges. Dear participants of the conference, I have the honor to invite you to listen to the welcoming address by His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Miramonovich Mirziyoyev. The address will be delivered by the Secretary of the Security Council and the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Mr. Viktor Mahmudov. Мархамат Хурматли Виктор Владимирович.
Участникам международной конференции высокого уровня.
Asian states within the framework of the Joint Plan of Action for the implementation of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy. Dear ladies and gentlemen, heads of the international delegations, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you, all the participants of the high-level international conference, which is dedicated to implementation of the United Nations Global Counterterroristic Strategy in Central Asia. It is organized jointly with the United Nations Office for Counterterrorism and the Organizations for Security and Cooperation in Europe. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for supporting our initiative to uphold this conference. I'd like also to thank OSCE Secretary General Madam Helga Schmidt, United Nations, and Under Secretary General Mr. Vladimir Voronkov, the head of the UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, Mr. Natalia German, and ministers of foreign affairs of Central Asian countries, for our joint effort in organizing this important event. Your participation in this forum is clear evidence that you are well committed to jointly combat terrorism and other challenges and threats. Dear participants, today we're witnessing a strong, vibrant intensification of number of contradictions within the international relations. Overall decline in the level of confidence and cooperation among the countries. At the same time, we have to also name the armed conflicts. And that we also know that pandemic has also affected all the areas of public life, and it strengthens also terrorism. Within such difficult circumstances, it is very much important for the international community to consolidate our efforts in combating against the increasing global and regional security threats. 15 years ago, all the countries of the world endorsed the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, became the first comprehensive, collective, and universally recognized legal platform to combat national and international efforts in combating terrorism. In 2011, Central Asia provided the first successful example of the regional approach to implement this policy document, when all 5 countries adopted the joint action plan for the fulfillment and implementation of the later one. The implementation of the plan has strengthened regional consensus on shared principles and approaches in counterterrorism. Number of countries has developed nationwide or country systems combating terrorism. So that allowed us to develop more structural and productive dialogue, share experience and important information to build counterterrorism capacity to achieve together that cannot be achieved alone. As a result, today, number of international ratings consider Central Asia as one of the safest regions of the world. Recent years, we also see development of fundamental positive changes, gradual development of well-being and neighborhood collaborative relations among the countries of the region, which are based on the principles of friendship, mutual understanding, and benefit and trust. Regular consultative meetings are being held by Central Asian countries. Considering Afghanistan as an integral part of Central Asia, the states of the region provide humanitarian assistance to Afghan people to provide them with the great opportunity to rebuild peaceful economy and a strong country. Ladies and gentlemen, Uzbekistan has signed 14 main universal international legal documents and actively participates in global efforts to counter international terrorism. The state policy in this area is based on comprehensive, inclusive, and consistent approach. Well, it is well known that the approach combines the use of preventive measures along with the law enforcement, and not only state bodies but also civil society institutions are very actively involved in the implementation of key elements of the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. Key priorities in this regard is to establish a mutual understanding, dialogue, promoting strong dialogue and tolerance in the society, conflict prevention, and also proper education, promotion and advancement of education, including professional training, vocational training, employment development of job places, and also social protection for vulnerable population. Special attention is paid to intercultural and inter-religious dialogue, and also empowerment of women and young people. Fundamental basis for combating terrorism in Uzbekistan is there to ensure human rights and freedoms. I'm pretty sure, I'm confident that today you will be able to comprehensively analyze, review the course of our cooperation within the framework of the Joint Action Plan to provide novel, innovative directions and pathways. In this context, we suggest considering a number of proposals to increase efficiency of our joint counteractions against terrorism and extremism. Number one, it is quite obvious that further successful implementation of the counterterrorism strategy within the region requires strengthening of number of mechanisms for proper monitoring and critical evaluation of joint plan actions, and then implementing it, and then further coordination of cooperation among the Central Asian countries. We believe that it is long-standing idea to open the office of United Nations Counterterrorism Office in our region, and we welcome that in order to achieve the proper synergy in Central Asia. Number two, today almost every country in the world faces terrorism in cyberspace. Internet is becoming a tool to spread radical ideology, to recruit people, provide financial support to terroristic activities. So under these circumstances, it is crucial and critically important to develop capacity of our states to efficiently counteract the use of digital technologies for terroristic purposes. We call the UN Counterterrorism Office to intensify its efforts to implement the program on cybersecurity and new technologies in Central Asia, which has been adopted in 2020. So that's why we consider it is very important to create a unified electronic network on cyber terrorism in Central Asia to promote the development of exchange, the data and experience to develop research and best practices in this area. Besides, the transboundary nature of all these threats to the security within the cyberspace requires creation of unified international legal mechanisms to efficiently counter various forms of extremism. So we look forward and we're very much hopeful for the UN assistance in organizing and coordinating a dialogue on that issue. Number three, recent years, Central Asia countries have repatriated more than 1,500 of their citizens back from the war conflict zones, from the hotspots, and we've developed unique approaches to provide their rehabilitation and reintegration, resocialization back to our society. So that's why we propose establishing the Regional Council for Experts to comprise of leading experts from Central Asia under the aegis of United Nations Counterterrorism Office. So then another task. It is very much important for successful work countering terrorism and extremism to upbring efficient youth, and the youth policy shall be developed. So, of course, the UN youth strategy emphasizes that young people are the value of our society. So that's why, to have comprehensive discussions of all the issues, we propose to convene in 2023 in Samarkand a Youth Council of Central Asia and Southern Asia that we've proposed earlier. As a result of this meeting, it is important to develop a substantive action plan to expand multilateral cooperation among the youth of our countries. Number five, under the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy, as you are well aware, the key idea is to promote the ideas and principles of tolerance, mutual respect, and interreligious and intercultural dialogue, with strong participation from all the levels of the society. In 2018, based on the initiative of Uzbekistan, the UN General Assembly adopted a special resolution, Enlightenment and Religion Tolerance, which underlines the importance of elimination of illiteracy and ignorance, and also to promote tolerance, mutual respect, and understanding in the name of strengthening security and peace on the planet. That's why we propose that next year we have to conduct a high-level conference on enlightenment and religious tolerance, under the auspice of UN, to identify promising areas for practical cooperation. Dear ladies and gentlemen, our efforts to prevent and combat terrorism will be productive only if they are efficiently coordinated at the regional and global level. So therefore, the current form and the adoption of the Tashkent Declaration and also the updated Joint Action Plan to implement the UN Global Counter-Terroristic Strategy in Central Asia are of a great importance. I wish all the participants thoughtful and vibrant discussions and debates which are aimed to strengthen international security and stability. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, President of the Republic of Uzbekistan.
Thank you very much, Viktor Vladimirovich. Спасибо, господин Махмудов. Уважаемые участники конференции, позвольте от имени всех, кто сегодня здесь присутствует, поблагодарить президента Республики Узбекистан, его превосходительство Шавката Мирзиёева за это приветственное слово. Я уверен, что очень важные инициативы, которые были отражены в выступлении главы Узбекистана, прежде всего о борьбе с терроризмом в гиперпространстве,
of tolerance and interreligious dialogue and the reduction of risk factors in the management of labor migration shall form the basis of our future joint work to combat the global terrorist threat. The implementation of the proposals of President Shavkat Mirziyoyev to establish an office of the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism in Central Asia would allow the countries of the region to solidify coordination and assessment of the fulfillment of the Joint Action Plan. Now, I invite you to listen to the welcoming video message by the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres. Please.
This conference on Central Asian cooperation reminds us of the importance of uniting to counter terrorism and realizing shared values like peace, human rights, and social progress for all. When people do not see these values reflected in their daily lives, division and extremism grow. Poverty, violence, and insecurity create fertile soil for terror to take root and spread. The unfolding humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is one tragic example. The United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy has pioneered comprehensive, integrated, and principled efforts to tackle security challenges of the 21st century. I commend member states in Central Asia for having adopted the first regional counterterrorism strategy, the Joint Plan of Action, 10 years ago, and for their close cooperation with the United Nations to bring it to life across all phases of the Joint Plan of Action project. This includes anchoring efforts in the rule of law and human rights and protecting and advancing the rights of women and young people. My new agenda for peace, proposed in my report on our common agenda, recognizes that we cannot address terrorism and security challenges in the absence of concerted action on development and human rights for all people. We need societies defined by mutual trust, hope, and respect for human rights, not fear, mistrust, and terror. As you continue implementing your joint plan of action, let's keep working to help deliver the security, prosperity, and hope that every person across Central Asia deserves. Thank you.
On behalf of the government of Uzbekistan and all those present, I'd like to thank His Excellency the UN Secretary General for his unwavering support for the efforts aimed at strengthening stability and security in Central Asia, as well as ensuring the constant involvement of the United Nations in resolving the pressing issues in the region which require international cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have the honor to give the floor to the Under-Secretary General, Head of the UN Office Counterterrorism, His Excellency Mr. Vladimir Voronkov. Please, Mr. Voronkov.
Уважаемый господин министр, уважаемые участники.
A pleasure to welcome you to this international conference on the high level. First of all, I would like to thank the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, who initiated this conference at the 75th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. And also would like to thank the Uzbek president for those solid proposals on cooperating with the UN to fight terrorism, and of course we are ready to work closely on implementation of the ideas that we have just listened. I would also like to thank the government of Uzbekistan for the help and hospitality, and also in cooperation with my institute and the Institute of Interregional Strategic Relations and the OECE Regional Center of UN on Preventive Diplomacy in Central Asia. Joint Plan of Action is indeed a unique example of regional cooperation shown by the Central Asian countries in the context of implementation of global counter-terrorist strategy of the UN. As you know, Joint Plan of Action is the first regional document that has expired other regions with the same initiative, and today, 10 years after this document was adopted, it's time to look at what has been achieved, to look at what lessons we can draw, and also to outline the new steps towards the renewed plan. And today's conference is very timely. Situation in Afghanistan is very much uncontrolled, and then the Daesh is also increasing its size and presenting threats to the neighboring countries. Central Asian countries committed themselves to the actions in this regard. And this joint plan of action is indeed a mechanism that will help to step up the joint multilateral cooperation that we need at the moment. So in the his report, our joint agenda, Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, called terrorism strategic global risk, and called for the continuing cooperation in order to prevent it. And the Secretary General also underscored the importance of fighting the global crisis of the trust and erosion of truth. And I believe that in this context our social unity is an efficient weapon against terrorism, and it is for this reason that terrorism are trying to undermine our unity and sow the seeds of untrust. 20 years has passed since the Security Council has adopted a resolution 1373 that demonstrated the joint efforts to fight terrorism after the tragic events of 9/11, and 15 years ago the General Assembly adopted the Global Counter-Terrorist Strategy, the plan our joint actions to fight terrorism. And as you know, last year General Assembly adopted the universal and most importantly based on consensus resolution on the counter-terrorist strategy of the UN, and this resolution will also form our joint actions to fight terrorism in the future. A new reduction resolution strengthened our position in such areas as the human rights, rule of law, and interaction with the civil society, and many others. The Central Asia steps into the new decade of regional cooperation to fight terrorism. The Tashkent Declaration and renewed joint plan of action demonstrates the commitment of Central Asian countries to implement global strategy and fight terrorism in all its forms and manifestation. In this regard, I would like to say the following. First of all, we need to step up our joint actions to prevent terrorism, because the region is facing new threats and new challenges in this area. Military counter-terrorist operations may be a necessity, but they come at a very high price, which is human life, and they're very costly. And investment into the prevention to prevent terrorism is much more efficient. And of course, they include the doing out with the conditions that actually conducive to terrorism, and also undermining the recruitment and radicalization of new members. And human rights and gender aspect is very important. Secondly, fighting terrorism, we need to be to adopt the wholesome and inclusive approach. Of course, we need to step up the connection between the local connections, law enforcement, teachers, parents, so that we prepare the zero tolerance environment for terrorism by the society. Unfortunately, terrorism is very sustainable phenomenon, so we need to prepare ourselves today and brace ourselves for terrorism of tomorrow. And the law enforcement has been fighting the terrorist plots on a daily basis. And of course, we should remember that terrorists are ready to attack the society at any day. Unfortunately, we have to be lucky all the time, whereas it's suffice it for the terrorists to be lucky once. And in this context, to strengthen potential to fight the financial terrorism is very important, and of course it's very important at the time the cryptocurrency, in order to prevent the currency violations is very important. And of course today, fighting terrorism, we need to follow the change in the dynamic of threats, and I believe that this discussions in the course of today's will actually show us the best practices in this area, and I'm sure that will help us to design global response in fighting terrorism that will be in demand for the next few years. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, I'm very proud that the system of the UN continues to support the Central Asian countries in implementing global counter-terrorist strategy through its joint plan of actions. And of course, we've been implementing jointly the criminal prosecution, rehabilitation, reintegration, and also surveying the suspects from among the militant extremists, and technical assistance to the national plans of actions in order to prevent violent extremism. We'll continue to help the member states to counteract this threat by light armaments, and then of course we'll continue to provide help for the members in order to provide the most vulnerable targets, and we continue also we support the idea of creating the Office of Counter-Terrorist network in Central Asia. And of course, I'm thankful for my partners, for the UN, the regional center of the UN on preventive diplomacy, and also the civil societies for their commitment to fight terrorism. Your Excellencies, of course, humanity, kindness, this is how we know the people of Central Asia. And of course, these qualities are an efficient vaccine against violence. And of course, our conference is yet another opportunity to repeat our commitment to country-less agriculture regional cooperation, and I'm expecting new solutions from this conference. Thank you very much indeed.
Господин Бараков, большое спасибо за ваше выступление, уважаемые дамы и господа.
Helga Maria Schmidt planned to participate in the conference personally. Unfortunately, she was not able to come to Tashkent. The Secretary General is presented today by Madam Kupchina, the OSCE coordinator of activities to address transnational threats. Please, the floor is yours.
Уважаемый господин министр, Ваше превосходительство, дорогие
Distinguished participants of the conference. Для меня большая честь приветствовать вас на этом очень важном мероприятии, на этой конференции. Как вы знаете, ОБСЕ соорганизуется с правительством республики.
already mentioned by the distinguished Mr. Minister, the OSCE Secretary General, Her Excellency Helga Maria Schmidt, was looking forward to visit Tashkent, but she was not able to come due to the unprecedented and extraordinary events ongoing in and around Ukraine. Let me start this statement by expressing our sincere gratitude to our Uzbek counterparts for taking this important initiative. The 10th anniversary of the Joint Plan of Action for the implementation of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy in Central Asia is certainly an occasion worth commemorating. As United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres noted back in 2017, Central Asian countries were leading by example, and a number of subsequent efforts around the world were inspired by this first regional undertaking to put the global counterterrorism strategy into action. In the course of these past 10 years, the OSCE has been supporting its Central Asian participating states in preventing and countering violent extremism and terrorism by enhancing the capacities of the national authorities to tackle these threats. We have done this by supporting the review and renewal of national strategies and action plans on counterterrorism. We also supported Central Asian efforts in the rehabilitation and reintegration of women and children formerly affiliated with foreign terrorist fighters. We have assisted in building national capacities in countering the financing of terrorism, jointly with the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, just to give you a few examples. The OSCE promotes coordination among different government agencies, as well as cooperation with civil society and private sector. Another main pillar of the OSCE's comprehensive approach is promoting respect for human rights and the rule of law as the basis for effective responses to terrorism and violent extremism. All these efforts took place in close cooperation between the OSCE Secretariat, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and other OSCE institutions, and our field operations here in the region, as well as with implementing partners on the ground, state agencies and civil society partners. Through our framework for action in response to the implications of Afghanistan for the OSCE region, we are also strengthening cooperation with Central Asia. This will help to address the challenges associated with the evolving situation in your neighborhood. Strong partnerships within the international community are crucial to tackle all security threats and common challenges. We appreciate the excellent cooperation between the OSCE and United Nations, namely with the United Nations Office for Countering Terrorism in preparation of this very conference. We will continue to develop these partnerships as a key element in effectively addressing common challenges. In concluding, allow me once again to extend our gratitude to the government of Uzbekistan for hosting this important event, to the Institute for Strategic and Regional Studies under the President of Uzbekistan, to the UNOCT and all our partners for co-organizing this event. С благодарностью за замечательное гостеприимство наших узбекских коллег и друзей я желаю всем нам плодотворной конференции.
Благодарю вас, госпожа Kupchina. I sincerely thank Madam Kupchina for substantial remarks. Thank you. And now I invite participants to listen to the video address by the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General, Head of the Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, Madam Natalia German.
Ваше превосходительство, господин министр Камилов.
Minister Kamilov, Excellency Ministries, Mr. Secretary of the Security Council, Mr. Mahmoudov, Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Voronkov, distinguished regional and international partners, let me express my gratitude to our Uzbek colleagues and especially the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Institute of Strategic and Interregional Research for supporting the organization of this important conference. For the regional UN Center, it has become a privilege to become a co-organizer of this conference, which was initiated as part of the UN General Assembly by the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Miramonovich Mirziyoyev. 10 years ago in Ashgabat, the first joint plan of action was adopted to carry out global counter-terrorism, anti-terrorism strategy of the United Nations in Central Asia. This was a first document of its kind in the world which specified collective efforts in a specific region, in this case, the Central Asia. And the shared understanding of the Central Asian countries on violent extremism and terrorism, and the willingness to cooperate at regional level facilitated the adoption of such a unique document. Over many years, the plan served as a regional platform on all focus areas of the global counterterrorism strategy of the United Nations. In particular, to eliminate the factors that facilitate spread terrorism, measures to strengthen the nation's capacities and the role of the UN systems in observing and promoting human rights and rule of law. Using the joint plan of action as the basis, the regional center, jointly with the counterterrorism Office of the United Nations as part of separate projects, has helped Central Asian countries to improve their professionalism in such areas as terrorism financing, border security, cyber security, boosting the role of civil society, especially of women and youth, human rights, working with the media, and improving the role of religious leaders in preventing security threats. We also encompass such specific areas such as the role of sport in preventing extremism. Working jointly with the Counterterrorism Office of the United Nations, we facilitated the development of national strategies and action plans. And in this particular area, we enjoyed a very close cooperation with the governments of Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. The regional center, it has also been important to support and encourage regional interaction. Over the past 10 years, we have held numerous consultancies in various regions associated with countering terrorism at all levels. It should also be highlighted that Phase 4 of the joint project of the Regional Center and the Counterterrorism Office of the United Nations with very specific propositions was presented during the Regional Center-driven conference with the Ministries of Foreign Affairs of Central Asian countries in Dushanbe, December last year. Distinguished attendees, as I already mentioned, we've seen quite a lot of changes over the past 10 years. It has become clear that over the past years, the global situation has aggravated significantly. For example, the situation in Afghanistan in August last year developed along a scenario that nobody expected, and the seizure of power by the Taliban in Afghanistan created new uncertainties, such as the increased production of drugs, especially in northern Afghanistan, and efficient border management, which has always been a part and parcel of security, has become ever more relevant and topical for all the countries in the region. Over the past 10 years, we've witnessed how such formations as Islamic State could emerge, and those that could not only commit terror acts but seize significant swaths of land. After the destruction of the Islamic State, the impact of this phenomenon can still be felt very clearly. Especially this is the case of the returnees, former militants and their family members. And in this context, I'd like to highlight the efforts taken by Central Asian countries in returning former militants and their family members to their home countries. And quite a number of these operations that were carried out in Central Asian countries can serve as a model to other countries of the world. We see an increased relevance of cybersecurity, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the recruitment of young people by various extremist organizations has become ever more sophisticated. When we discuss cybersecurity, what we mean is not only the impact and influence of the internet and recruitment, but also the use of cyber space for committing attacks. We have become ever more dependent on the internet in public agencies and public governance in general, as well as acquiring public services, and quite a number of incidents show that this dependence is being used by criminal groups. At global level, the situation has become much more complex, and contradictions have strengthened, and we see that unprecedented information warfare is being waged, leading to hate and animosity. And information warfare creates a very fruitful base for the emergence of terrorist and extremist organizations. Distinguished attendees, given these and other processes, as well as the challenges that have been aggravated by the global pandemic, the Central Asian initiatives, working jointly with the Regional Center and the United Nations Counterterrorism Office, has initiated a new plan of action. Over several months, we've exchanged ideas and opinions with Central Asian countries. I'd like to highlight that all the key propositions made by Central Asian countries were taken on board and reflected on in this document. So this new plan of action, just as the previous one, builds on the structure of the global counterterrorism strategy and incorporates all these 4 focus areas. Apart from additional and heightened attention to cybersecurity, border security, returning of former militants, the new strategy has a standalone chapter dedicated to women and girls and fighting extremism. It also incorporates monitoring and communication mechanisms which aim to improve the efficiency in carrying out the joint plan of action. Given the development of the situation in Afghanistan, the new joint strategy envisions new cooperation with this country. It should be highlighted that on a bilateral level, Central Asian countries already are engaging with the Afghan authorities in Kabul, including security efforts. At this point, it's very difficult to predict some results of this interaction, but there is hope that we will come up with some very good results. Distinguished colleagues, in my presentation I tried to describe this new plan of action, and I really hope that this new plan will help Central Asian countries and the United Nations organization as a very strong platform and basis to prevent terrorism, violent extremism for the years to come. Using this opportunity, I'd like to congratulate distinguished representatives of Central Asian countries with a very remarkable date, the 30th anniversary of Uzbekistan's membership of the United Nations. On behalf of United Nations Secretary General, I'd like to express our commitment to our constructive and multiversatile partnership. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for your address and using
Спасибо большое.
highly appreciate the helpful contribution of the UNRCCA to support the efforts of Central Asian states to prevent risks and threats to the security of the region and to develop tools of preventive diplomacy. Thank you. And now I invite the conference participants to listen to the video address by the Secretary General of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, His Excellency Mr. Zhang Ming. Please.
Dear participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be invited to participate in a high-level international conference on the topic regional cooperation among Central Asian states within the framework of the Joint Plan of Action for the implementation of the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy. I'm confident that this conference will contribute to strengthening of a political mutual trust between the countries of the region and deepening cooperation in the fight against terrorism. As we all know, the UN General Assembly adopted the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy in 2006. And the Central Asian countries were among the first countries to fully implement this strategy. In 2010, with the support of the Regional Center of Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia and the Counterterrorism Implementation Task Force, a joint plan of action for the implementation of the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy in Central Asia was developed, which was adopted by the countries of the region on November 30, 2011 in Ashgabat, Turkmenistan. For more than 10 years, due to the efforts of the countries of the region, Central Asia has made significant progress in constructive solutions to major regional problems such as terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, SCO has always supported the efforts of the Central Asian countries to ensure peace, security, and stability in their countries by fighting terrorism. Since its establishment, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has adopted a number of basic legal documents, created a relatively comprehensive cooperation mechanism, established a special anti-terrorist structure, regularly conducted anti-terrorist exercises, and strengthened cooperation in the field of border defense. A number of measures have been taken to develop security cooperation between member states and enhance the organization's counterterrorism capacity. A lot of effective work has been done, and the number of terrorist and extremist actions has significantly decreased. Over the past 2 years, the spread of the COVID pandemic has affected the socio-economic development of the member states, and serious changes have taken place in the social sphere, which have provided terrorist organizations with the opportunity to introduce their extremist ideas and violent ideologies. It can be said that efforts to combat terrorism in areas affected by the pandemic face a lot of problems. It is worth noting that the summit of the heads of the SCA member states held in Dushanbe on September 17, 2021, made it possible to make significant progress in improving the mechanism for responding to new challenges and the security threats faced by the SCA member states. Relevant documents and plans were adopted to combat the three forces of evil, ensure international information security, and implement an anti-drug strategy. At the same time, considering that almost half of the world's youth, more than 800 million young people aged 15 to 25, live in the SCO region. The SCO member states are taking appropriate measures in order to provide young people with a healthier and a more positive choice to prevent the spread of terrorism and extremist ideas among young people, such as the development of an agreement on cooperation in the field of youth, work between the authorized bodies of the SCO member states, providing young people from the member states with more opportunities to study abroad, encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship, etc. In addition, the member states consider the eradication of the social basis of terrorism as an important direction in the fight against terrorism and make significant efforts to eradicate poverty, conduct vocational training, reduce unemployment, reduce illiteracy, as well as prevent the spread of terrorist, separatist, and extremist ideas. In the action plan of Uzbekistan's chairmanship in the SCO in 2022, relevant events will be held this year. The history of the SCO's development over the past 2 decades has shown that the organization activities have made an important contribution to turning the region into a space of lasting peace and harmony. Dear ladies and gentlemen, terrorism, like a virus, knows no borders. Whether it is the fight against the pandemic or the fight against terrorism and extremism, our joint efforts and broad international cooperation are necessary. Terrorism is terrorism, wherever it occurs or exists. In the face of the common enemy of humanity and our common goals, only by unity and comprehensively strengthening cooperation can the common interests of the countries of the region be protected. Unity is strength, and only a united front can achieve victory in the future. Reaffirming its firm support for the efforts of the UN and its Security Council, which plays a central and coordinating role in maintaining international peace and security, stimulating global development, promoting and protecting human rights. The SCO calls on all states and international organizations to increase cooperation in the fight against terrorism under the central coordinating role of the UN. In conclusion, I would like to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Uzbekistan, the UN Counterterrorism Office, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and the UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia for organizing this conference. I sincerely wish the participants of the conference further effective and fruitful work. Thank you for your attention. Succeed.
On behalf of the conference participants, I express my gratitude to Mr. Zhang Ming for his video address and words of support. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, including through its regional anti-terrorist structure located in Tashkent, plays an active and responsible role in the fight against terrorism in the SCO space. The Republic of Uzbekistan, as the country presiding over the SCO in 2021-22, is taking initiatives to strengthen the coordination of the SCO member states, developing their cooperation within international organizations in countering the new challenges and threats. I invite the conference participants to listen to the video address by the chair of the Counterterrorism Committee of the United Nations Security Council, Mr. Tirimurti. Please.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, allow me to begin by thanking the government of Uzbekistan, UN Office of Counterterrorism, OSCE, and the Institute for Strategic and Regional Studies under the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan for inviting me to speak at the opening of this conference. It is a great honor for me to address you all on behalf of the UN Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee, which I currently serve as chair. The committee has established a long-standing and constructive dialogue with the states of Central Asia, which remain key partners in the international counter-terrorism efforts. The terrorist threat to the countries of Central Asian region has remained high due to the returning foreign terrorist fighters and more recently to the developments in Afghanistan. Thousands of individuals from Central Asia travel to the conflict zones to join the ranks of terrorist groups, where they have acquired the skills required to carry out terrorist attacks, spread terrorist propaganda, and recruit new members. The return and relocation of such individuals to Central Asia continues to pose a significant challenge. Recent developments in neighboring Afghanistan have raised global concern about the possibility of its becoming a safe haven for Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups. The recent 1988 committee report to the Security Council noted that the ties between the Taliban, largely through the Haqqani network, and the Al-Qaeda and foreign terrorist fighters remain close and are based on ideological alignment and relationship forged through common struggle and intermarriage. Security Council listed terrorist groups with links to Central and South Asia are now reported to have greater freedom of movement in Afghanistan. Afghanistan could also become a magnet for terrorist fighters from other regions. The deteriorating situation in Afghanistan, including the humanitarian conditions, is also a source of growing concern. The grievances of the population of Afghanistan, already exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, may get further aggravated, creating a potential risk of radicalization and spillover into neighboring countries. The international and regional cooperation remains crucial in the fight against terrorism. In January 2022, India hosted the first India Central Asia Summit, which was attended by heads of all Central Asian states. Here, the leaders condemned terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and reaffirmed the importance of Security Council Resolution 2593 of 2021, in which the Council unequivocally demands that Afghan territory not be used for sheltering, training, planning, or financing terrorist acts, and calls for concerted action against all terrorist groups. Peace and security in Afghanistan is a critical imperative that all of us need to collectively strive for. Excellencies, the Counter-Terrorism Committee has a vital role to play in monitoring, promoting, and facilitating the implementation by Central Asian states of relevant Council resolutions to counter terrorism. Supported by its Executive Directorate or CTED, the committee conducts assessments of states' implementation of the relevant Council resolutions. Because of the importance of Central Asia in the international fight against terrorism, some states of the region, including our host Uzbekistan, have been visited more than once. We regularly invite representatives of UNOCT, UN Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, and other expert regional and international organizations to join the assessment visits to Central Asia. The committee's visits and findings have become a primary source of reference for technical assistance providers and donors within the overall coordination of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, and with a view to enhancing member states' capacity building. In this regard, I would like to note the importance of member states giving their consent to the sharing of the committee's visit findings, either in part or in whole. This is how the UN and non-UN partners, such as those present today, as well as other providers, can ensure the delivery of tailored counter-terrorism technical assistance in accordance with the requirements of the relevant Council resolutions and the UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. For over 10 years, the Joint Plan of Action to implement the global strategy in Central Asia has been a vital instrument for delivering technical assistance across its 4 pillars. I would like to commend all providers of this support for taking into consideration the committee's assessment while designing their capacity building programs within the framework of the JPOA. Excellencies, before I close, I would like to reiterate the need for zero tolerance to terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. There cannot be any exception or justification for any act of terrorism, regardless of motivation and wherever, whenever, and by whomever committed. As UN Security Council Resolution 1566 of 2004 mentions, and I quote, terrorism under no circumstances is justifiable by considerations of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnical, religious, or other similar nature. This conference illustrates the political will of Central Asian states to work together towards achieving their common goal to make this region free from terrorism. I would like to reassure you that the committee and CTED remain determined to engage with all relevant stakeholders to assist the states of Central Asia in their efforts to address terrorist threats in accordance with the relevant Council resolutions. I'm convinced that your governments will continue this close cooperation and collaboration and use the updated joint plan of action to counter the evolving threat of terrorism in a coordinated and comprehensive way. The committee and CTED will continue to support you in these efforts. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Tirumurti, for your address. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, now when we have listened to the welcoming address by the High Representatives, I propose to move on to hearing the keynote speakers of the conference. I am happy to offer the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, His Excellency Mr. Mukhtar Tleoberdi.
First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone here, and I'd like to thank our Uzbek hosts, our colleagues, and personally Abdulaziz Hafizovich for this high level of the conference and hospitality expressed to all of us. I'd like to congratulate all the colleagues from the Central Asian countries with the accession, like 30 years anniversary accession to UN. And we have great opportunity today, together with the leaders of international organizations, to be a part of this conference and to commemorate this date, and once again to reassure our commitments to the Charter of UN. So I would like to emphasize especially that today, due to the efforts of all Central Asian countries, we were able to develop and establish constructive multilateral political dialogue at a platform of consultation meetings of the high-level delegations. In Turkmenbashi and also in Nur Sultan, we've had high-level meetings, so that gave us an impetus to the following collaborative efforts. It is extremely important that strengthening the strong understanding on rational use of drink water. So we are there to develop the proper resolution of all the challenges which we have there, to demonstrate to the global society our joint response. Of course, extremism and terrorism, those are key priorities of our joint efforts. So this is why Kazakhstan welcomes the initiative of the Republic of Uzbekistan, supports the initiative of Uzbekistan and also Counter-Terroristic Committee to adopt the new updated joint action plan to follow on with the strategy to be implemented in the Central Asian countries. So from the moment of adopting this plan in 2011 in Ashgabat, geopolitical landscape of our region has been changed tremendously. So the establishment of and then the settlement of the Islamic State is well observed by the countries of Central Asia. International terroristic organizations are still there. So the removal of the troops of coalition did not serve any good to the development of better conditions in the region. So the activity of organized crimes and drug trafficking, illegal migration, altogether it is good ground and good soil for development of terrorism. As we well aware, in January current year, Kazakhstan has become a subject of invasion by the militant troops, and unfortunately these tragic events brought down to a number of people who died. So right now there is an investigation going on, number of them, and quite soon in his address the President of Kazakhstan in mid-March will voice the results of this investigation. Based on the initiative of our President, we've started up a complete reboot of all law enforcement activities, and we truly want to establish strong feedback and collaborative approach supported by civil society in Kazakhstan. So this is how we finalize the 5-year national program on combating religious extremism and terrorism, and it is echoing our regional action plan, of course, and I'm pretty sure that it is renewed version will become a strong way to move forward for our collaborative efforts. We are strong in following our commitments at the international arena, and we are there to support international collaboration in combating terrorism. Of course, it will be done together in close collaboration with the countries of Central Asia and regional organizations, representatives of which are present here during this forum. Would like to express our gratitude to the colleagues from Central Asia and Counter-Terroristic Committee of the UN in supporting the Code of Conduct to advance the free of terrorism area in Central Asia. Up to date, 89 countries of the world has assessed that, so we call for the promotion of this initiative. One of the priorities of the code, just like the action plan, it is to prevent the threat of foreign fighters, terroristic foreign fighters. Jusan and Rusafa, those are the operations that we were able to uphold. So there were 5 stages of Jusan, so we were able to repatriate from Syria and Iraq 607 citizens of Kazakhstan, including 413 children. Many citizens, nationals of the Republic of Kazakhstan, they have been repatriated back themselves, so without the operations. So, and rehabilitation, repatriation is ongoing, and we truly want to continue exchange of opinions and sharing experience in this regard. So I would like to expand our work with women and with the NGOs. In conclusion, I would like to once again congratulate all of you with such an important high-level event, and wish you great success and fruitful collaboration. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much, esteemed Mukhtar Biskenovich. Спасибо большое. Я сейчас...
Of the Republic of Tajikistan, His Excellency Mr. Sirajuddin Mukhriddin.
Уважаемый
Esteemed Abdulaziz Hafizovich, Mr. Kamilov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Uzbekistan, dear Vladimir Ivanovich Voronkov, Deputy General Secretary of UN, dear heads of the delegations, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the government of the Republic of Uzbekistan for them to organize such a conference, and of course, again, a warm welcome which has been expressed to all of us. We feel your hospitality. I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to the co-organizers of the conference, Counter-Terroristic Department of UN, Regional Center of UN on Preventive Diplomacy in Central Asia, and the OEC, of course. Я перегнала. We would like to welcome this international event, which is devoted to strengthen regional collaboration and strong implementation of global counter-terroristic strategy of UN. Under conditions of continuous conflicts in different areas of the world and the hotspots which are around our region, and also due to deterioration of social economic situation due to pandemic COVID-19, we think it is very much important, we deem important to continue our joint efforts to prevent threats to the regional security. Terrorism, extremism, and illicit drug trafficking and also organized crimes continue to establish serious threats to international world and security. Moreover, it jeopardizes regional and international efforts to provide for stability, economic and social development, and also human rights protection all over the world. Dear colleagues, as a response to constantly growing threat of terrorism and extremism, it should be comprehensive and it should be timely and strong under the key coordinating role of UN. So that's why I would like to reassure the commitment of the Republic of Tajikistan to efficient implementation of global counter-terroristic strategy of UN, which is a unique legal document to strengthen national, regional and international efforts in combating terrorism. We believe that all our endeavors shall be devoted to eradicate military infrastructure of international terrorism. We have to remove political, military and financial provision to that. We have not to allow the use of internet in order to further radicalize our population, not to allow recruitment and promotion of terroristic ideas and extremistic ideas to happen in the internet. Understanding all these strong challenges, the government of the Republic of Tajikistan undertakes strong decisions and comprehensive measures which are devoted to prevent these challenges and threats. Also under the context of implementing the joint plan of action. So I would like to thank the Counter-Terroristic Committee of the UN for starting up the fourth phase of the project under the Joint Action Plan on December 8, 2021 in Dushanbe, under the annual meeting, 11th annual meeting of Deputy Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Central Asian countries. Dear colleagues, stability and security in the region to a high degree linked to the situation in Afghanistan. Constant, complicated military political conditions in Afghanistan could become a good ground for dissemination of terrorism, prevalence of terrorism and criminal networks to the region. Our great concern is called up by the activization of the activity of terroristic groups in the northern parts of that country at the background of significant participation of militants from the Middle East, drug trafficking and armed trafficking. So of course the support of terroristic groups in Central Asia will bring down to quite negative consequences. Of course, Tajikistan cannot be well, of course, Tajikistan number of times has called international society to bring help and support and humanitarian aid to the Afghani people who suffer a lot. Tajikistan proposes and wants to provide logistic collaborative efforts also by providing 6 bridges at Tajik-Afghani border to transport humanitarian aid cargoes. Currently, we're able to perform a number of them using the POEs of our countries a lot, and that was done under the aegis of UN. Dear participants of the conference, from the moment of adopting global counter-terroristic strategy of UN, Tajikistan has developed 2 national strategies in counter-terroristic activities against terrorism and extremism for the period from 2016-2020 and 2021-2025. Would like to emphasize that the development of those strategies has been done together with the representatives of civil society and international organizations. These documents specify priority areas which would become good ground for efficient prevention and in combating the threats of the security of our countries. All the measures that has been undertaken under these strategic plans has impacted efficiently to the process of repatriation of Tajiki nationals from the hot areas, hot zones. Thus, more than 300 citizens, nationals of the Republic, were able to be repatriated from the hotspots of the Middle East. From Iraq, we were able to repatriate more than 80 children. So we work also towards repatriation of our citizens from Syria. In 2018-2019, in collaboration with UN, OSCE and EU, Tajikistan was able to conduct in Dushanbe 2 international conferences on combating terrorism and extremism. During those conferences, the participants emphasized the importance of improving collaboration and coordination in all those areas. And it was also emphasized that we have to share information, we have to provide for security at the border, and we have to provide for legal collaboration, and we also have to share our advanced experience and best practices. The conference of 2019 was first in the series of number of regional initiatives to implement the New York Convention decision, which has been undertaken by the heads of counter-terroristic agencies of UN countries. As a result of that conference, a Dushanbe declaration has been adopted, and we've launched Dushanbe process. We are pretty sure that Dushanbe process will serve a very important platform for wide-range dialogue, comprehensive exchange of information and best practices for all stakeholding parties. In that regard, it is very much important to improve regional collaboration in preventing terrorism with the use of new technologies, and also in particular the artificial intellect and unmanned flying vehicles based on our commitments in international law.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to also inform you about the initiative of the Tajik Republic on holding in Dushanbe on the 18th-19th October 2022 of the next conference within the framework of the Dushanbe process on counteracting terrorism and its financing. Dushanbe conference will be ready for closer cooperation. Our country, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Minister. Теперь бы хотел передать слово заместителю министра иностранных дел Кыргызской республики господину Азизбеку Мадмарову. Пожалуйста, господин Мадмаров. Esteemed Abdulaziz Hafizovich, dear Vladimir Ivanovich, first of all, on behalf of the Kyrgyz Republic and on my own behalf, I would like to thank our Uzbek brothers, Mr. Kamilov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Uzbekistan, for excellent organization of this conference on such a pressing topic for Central Asia, and also for warm hospitality. And also would like to thank the co-organizers of this conference, the, CT, OCE, the Regional Preventive Diplomacy Center of UN, and also for helping the Kyrgyz Republic in fighting terrorism and preventing extremism. Dear colleagues, in the course of many years, international terrorism and violent extremism has been presenting threat to security, stability and sustainable development of many countries of the world. Kyrgyz Republic, like many other countries of the region, actually felt the manifestation of extremism and the also attempts to infiltrate the radical ideologies into the country, and also overturning the constitutional bodies and the government. And Kyrgyzstan continues to take active part in supporting all the measures that are taken by the international community in fighting international terrorism. So Kyrgyz Republic is engaged in bilateral and multilateral cooperation in order to counter terrorism, extremism, illicit drug trafficking, transnational organized crime, cybercrime, illegal migration, corruption, and many other transnational challenges. And the aim of the work in this regard is forming the joint platform, joint position, and the working out the mechanisms of confronting the current threats and challenges in order to facilitate the cooperation between the competent bodies of Kyrgyzstan and international community. And we also believe that the central role has to be played by the UN in this regard, and of course in Secretary General Antonio Guterres, in his report, Our Joint Adventure, called Terrorism, Our Strategic Global Risk, and pressed the need for activating international cooperation in fighting terrorism. And of course we share the views of Secretary General expressed in that report, and therefore we were the co-authors of the aforementioned resolution. I would like to reaffirm the commitment of our country in the efficient implementation of the global counter-terrorist strategy of UN, which is indeed a unique global document to strengthen national, regional and international efforts to fight terrorism. Within the joint plan of actions and the global counter-terrorist strategy of UN, our country is undertaking activities on the 4 areas that are outlined in this document. So within the last decades, since this document was signed, so we have achieved very good results in preventing the threats of terrorism. And of course I would like to thank the Counter-Terrorist Office of UN for the updated second joint plan of action that will help Central Asian countries to fight terrorism. And it is great gratification that we see that the decision of the CT on sending the regional coordinator of the CT to Bishkek, and of course since his arrival he's been doing a great job, and we believe that his mandate could be extended so that we could help to efficiently realize a program and projects within this new updated program. And of course the very serious factor and threat to the threat is a very complex military political conflicts in Afghanistan and in the Near East, and of course where the which became the home for many ideological centers and the armed terrorist organization. And in view of the events of 2021 that resulted in toppling of the power in Afghanistan, a potential threat from this territory is of course the source of our concern, and Kyrgyz Republic is ready to continue peaceful and neighborly relations with Afghanistan. And of course Afghanistan is going through a acute socio-economic crisis and is in need of financial economic health of the world community. In order to prevent further deterioration of social and humanitarian situation in Afghanistan, Kyrgyz Republic supports a UN activity in providing help to Afghan people. Kyrgyz Republic welcomes the will of the current government of Afghanistan to stabilize situation in the country and fight the drug production and not to allow use the territory of Afghanistan by the international terrorist groups against the neighboring countries and the world. And of course the situation in Afghanistan may have this unproportionate impact on the situation in Afghanistan, in Central Asia, and therefore the implementation of the projects that will further strengthen the security and safety of the borders by UN and OSCE is to be welcomed. Of course the fate of the youngsters of Afghanistan is of great concern, and of course we are ready to provide young Afghans, well, preferably women, opportunities to study in our universities. And currently, thanks to our collaboration with our partners, we've been implementing programs on of academic studies for Afghan youth, the Academy of the OSCE, American University in Central Asia, and Diplomatic Academy of the Foreign Ministry. And of course we continue to advance this issue on various platforms, and in the light of the current conditions in Afghanistan, the role of the OSCE Academy is ever increasing, and of course we're hoping to see support from the General Secretary of the OSCE in the activity of this unique academic institution. And of course one of our proposals that we initiated is to set up at the Academy of the OSCE the Center for Afghan Studies, which could be independent academic analytical center for regional, international experts to study the current process in Afghanistan and design practical recommendations. Dear colleagues, counterterrorism is a very important issue in our agenda in order to provide for national security, and therefore we are undertaking various steps in order to prevent terrorism, to minimize the impact of terrorist acts, and also implementing the activities within the global counter-terrorist strategy of UN. In March last year, my government, in collaboration with the international colleagues, implemented a humanitarian mission named MERIM, where 79 children, Kyrgyz citizens, were repatriated from Iraq in accordance with the rehabilitation plan. These children are to be reintegrated into the society, and of course we joined 12 out of 19 universal anti-terrorist documents, and the activity in this regard is ever continued, and we continue to further enhance our internal legislation. In 2019 we have adopted law on preventing financing of terrorist activity and money laundering, of criminal process, and we have new draft of the law on countering terrorism, which is currently under consideration, and also from the 1st December last year the new editions of the criminal and criminal procedural code are adopted in order to react to the terrorist threat. Different bodies of Kyrgyzstan designing the complex of counter-terrorist activities for the period 2017-22. We are currently working on new program for 23-27, and the state policy with regards to the religious life and on our interaction with the religious activity, promoting tolerance. Ideas have been stepped up, and of course in the core, and then the state concept for the 2026, which has the name of setting up the law with the government with the rule of law, and preventing the radicalization of the people, and preventing the religious radicalization of citizens. Dear colleagues, of course I take this opportunity to mention that we've been commemorating the 30th anniversary of membership in the OSCE, and this regard the Kyrgyz Republic in September 2021 and in December 21 in Stockholm at the meeting of the Minister of Foreign Affairs initiated the high-level meeting OSCE Central Asia, where we could discuss various ways of interaction, all three security dimensions. And of course we are ready to hold this meeting on the 11th and 12th of May, and of course we would like to count for the help of the Secretary General of OSCE, Madam Helga Schmidt, the heads of the OSCE institutions, and the Ministers of Foreign Relations, and of course we will send official invitations through diplomatic channels. In conclusion, I'd like to reaffirm that Kyrgyz Republic is against terrorism in all its manifestations, and the deterioration of international situation and the growth of the terrorist threat calls for strengthening our interaction, consolidation our efforts in various formats. Of course, based on our traditional multi-century spiritual, cultural links, we are very much interested in the stable socio-economic development and the well-being of Central Asian countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madmarov. Слово предоставляется заместителю министра иностранных дел Туркменистана господину Вепа Хаджиеву. Mr. Kamilov, colleagues.
Нашим узбекским коллегам и соорганизаторам конференции со стороны международных организаций, а именно контртеррористическому управлению ООН, региональному центру ООН по превентивной дипломатии для стран Центральной Азии и Организации по безопасности и сотрудничеству в Европе, ОБСЕ, слова благодарности и созданные условия для проведения форума, а также традиционное ташкентское гостеприимство. Хотел бы также поприветствовать делегации всех стран региона Центральной Азии и Европы, высокопоставленных участников из авторитетных международных организаций. Уважаемые коллеги, Центральная Азия не случайно стала первым регионом мира, в котором на системной основе началось всеобъемлющее и комплексное осуществление глобальной контртеррористической.
Global counterterrorism strategy has started its implementation for the stable development of this continent, of the world in general. The high responsibility of nations' governments was the basis for adopting on the November 2011 of the Ashgabat Declaration of Central Asian countries. So over the past 10 years of the implementation of these documents shows the efficiency of multi-level approach to opposing global terrorism at regional and sub-regional levels. And this serves as a very good model to other regions, for other regions. So it is really encouraging to highlight that the regional documents were adopted in Southern, Central Africa, as well as Middle East. So continuing the processes that were initiated in Ashgabat, we would like to highlight the initiative of the President of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Miramonovich Mirziyoyev, to hold this conference dedicated to the anniversary of this joint global strategy and the adoption of a new counterterrorism strategies. Thanks to our coordinated work, we believe it has become very important to keep in mind two very important issues. First, which is the work on the ground, which suggests expanding project activities, in particular expanding the human and material and technical capacity, as well as involving the expertise of Central Asian countries and other regions countries, as well as strengthening the expert support of our joint strategy. In this regard, I'd like to highlight the efficient work of the Center for Preventive Diplomacy and the Counterterrorism Office of the United Nations, which support the existing practices as well as introduce new, more efficient practices. Secondly, the creation of regional efficient hubs for fruitful cooperation. In this context, the implementation of Turkmenistan's proposition on the establishment of the office in Central Asia will help reorient the efforts towards the needs of the Central Asian countries and to elevate the level of cooperation with regional, national organizations and civil society and reduce office and operational costs. Currently, we're working on identifying the modality and format of the regional office. We already sent respective requests, organized a series of meetings with representatives of the Counterterrorism Office of the United Nations and the Regional Preventive Diplomacy Center, and we're planning to finalize this work the current year and discuss with the countries of the region as well as other stakeholders all these draft documents to approve a mutually accepted format, structure, and the parameters of this proposition. Distinguished attendees, today Central Asian countries are adopting important long-term strategic documents and the updated plan of action of the United Nations counter-terrorism strategy, and we would like to thank Central Asian countries, international organizations for their hard work in preparing this key document, for agreeing the positions and approaches of all the stakeholders and the flexibility and transparency demonstrated. Based on the previous cycle of the joint strategy, we are reassured that it would be important to introduce the practice of preparing midterm reviews, and it should be synchronized with the global terrorism, counterterrorism overview, which was presented in December 2021. Also, it is really important to work with the United Nations agencies to implement this joint strategy involving other key international security organizations. First off, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. In this regard, one of the key challenges is to implement the updated joint strategy as well as the framework program to fight terrorism 2013, as well as the Belgrade Declaration, Ministerial Declaration dated 2015 on a wholesome approach, prevention and countering terrorism and violent extremism. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, so all this is based on Turkmenistan's firm position to continue strengthening the United Nations coordinating role, especially in terrorism prevention, as part of the international framework to counter terrorism and violent extremism. In this regard, we highly value the current state of evaluation, current state of interaction, and are committed to seeking further modus operandi to strengthen the involvement of the United Nations Counterterrorism Office. Using this opportunity, I'd like to once again thank our colleagues for organizing this important international conference and express the commitment of Turkmenistan to contribute to our shared goal of ensuring the prosperity of this region. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Hajiev. А теперь, уважаемые участники конференции, мы выслушали всех основных докладчиков и можем перейти к обсуждениям. Сейчас хотел бы передать слово ряду представителей, постоянных членов Совета Безопасности ООН. Первым выступит представитель Китайской Народной Республики, госпожа Тянь Янь. Прошу вас, госпожа посол, слово вам. Вы можете говорить отсюда, с трибуны или с места, госпожа посол. Mr. Abdulaziz Hafizovich, distinguished attendees, Assalamu alaikum. The situation with countering terrorism in Central Asia is aggravated as a result of the unprecedented global changes that we're witnessing, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. In response to the challenges and threats, the Chinese side urges to adhere to the genuine approach based on the United Nations steering role, and the Chinese People's Republic is committed to our cooperation with Central Asian countries. Secondly, addressing poverty-related issues to eradicate the basis for the emergence of terrorism, and all the stakeholder countries should make a positive impact on the temporary government of the Taliban to urge them to fulfill their duties, to coordinate their actions with other ethnic groups, and to enable Afghanistan and facilitate the solutions of the Afghanistan problems. Third, we need to make sure that certain countries should put aside some political and ideological biases and prejudices to support Central Asian countries' efforts to implement preventive measures to counter terrorism and facilitate international and regional cooperation. Fourth, to help Central Asian countries in countering terrorism through exchanging information and expertise, as well as providing technical assistance in strengthening the regional anti-terrorist defense. China signed agreement with an agreement to fight the three evils in helping the countries to provide expertise and technical assistance in countering terrorism. At the same time, China provides humanitarian aid to Afghanistan totaling $47 million. China stands ready, together with the region's nations, to proffer its assistance in the implementation of the United Nations Security Council's counterterrorism strategy to promote anti-terrorist cooperation both on bilateral basis as well as within the framework of OSCE. России. Большое спасибо, госпожа посол. Сейчас я хотела бы обратить внимание всех участников на видеообращение господина Оливье Карон, специального посланника по борьбе с терроризмом Министерства иностранных дел Французской Республики. Уважаемый господин министр,
Unfortunately, it is taking place against the backdrop of a profoundly destabilizing armed aggression in the heart of Europe. As you will understand, we are not anymore in a business as usual mode, and I do regret not to be able to attend the meeting in person. Terrorism yet remains a major concern, notwithstanding the results achieved of late in the fight against terrorist organizations, especially the territorial defeat of Daesh, which was beaten back to clandestinity in the Levant, thanks to the action of the international coalition. We still have to contend with the resurgence of threats which are adept at taking advantage of political and economic instability, festering conflicts, and failures in governance. The countries in this region, the Central Asian region, have been confronted with the terrorist threat and have to face, in particular, the knock-on effects of developments in neighboring Afghanistan. France stands in support of your efforts and efforts undertaken to fend off these risks. Addressing terrorist threats requires a spirit of international cooperation. Cooperation which requires a commitment to uphold the norm governing international security. I trust that you will have productive deliberations in the next few days. Wish you success and reiterate my support to the role your countries play against terrorism and my support to the role of the United Nations in this field. I thank you for your attention.
We thank Mr. Kieran for his video address. I propose to listen a video address by Mr. Christopher Landberg, the acting First Deputy Counterterrorism Coordinator of the U.S. Department of State. Please.
Greetings from Washington, and thank you, UNOCT, UNRICA, OSCE, and the government of Uzbekistan for hosting this important high-level discussion. While I would prefer face-to-face discussions, I appreciate the opportunity to share our thoughts on the Joint Plan of Action, the terrorist threat landscape in Central Asia, and U.S. efforts to counter violent extremism in the region. Let me begin by recalling that Central Asia was the first region to develop and commit to a regional joint plan of action for the comprehensive implementation of the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy, an example for the rest of the world. As this region remains a front line in the battle against terrorism, collaborative efforts like the Joint Plan of Action are critical to our shared security. The recent UN Secretary General's report on combating ISIS underscores the need for the international community to work together to deny safe haven for terrorists, including in your neighboring nation, Afghanistan. We all share an interest in preventing Afghanistan from ever again being used as a base to plan terrorist attacks against our countries and our peoples. We must work together to counter these threats. For our part, the United States encourages and bolsters partner capacity in Central Asia bilaterally and through multilateral efforts, including our C5+1 regional diplomatic platform. This partnership facilitates regional security and makes our countries safer and more prosperous. The U.S.-led Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS has also engaged the non-coalition members in Central Asia, primarily through observer status invitations to our working groups. These international meetings focus on de-ISIS initiatives thematically, including deterring foreign terrorist fighter travel, counter-ISIS financing, and countering ISIS messaging. We intend for these engagements to demonstrate the value of multilateral cooperation on security matters of common concern, such as sharing a border with Afghanistan. Our programs in Central Asia help the countries of the region to detect, deter, and prevent the travel of known and suspected terrorists through improved border security practices outlined in UNSC Resolution 2396. The United States also provides significant funding to support programs to detain and manage foreign terrorist fighters in detention centers and post-release programs, and the rehabilitation and reintegration of foreign terrorist fighter family members from the region who traveled to Syria and Iraq. This includes technical assistance projects with Kazakhstan, a leader on these efforts, focused on prison and community-based rehabilitation and reintegration. Similarly, in Uzbekistan, where the government has repatriated more than 400 family members, we support repatriation, rehabilitation, and reintegration work through the UNOCT's Whole of UN Global Framework. We thank these countries for their partnership and commend them for taking responsibility for their citizens in northeast Syria, and urge others in the region to continue repatriating, rehabilitating, and reintegrating their citizens. We continue to support OSCE engagement through the Action Against Terrorism Unit, its field presence in Central Asia, and programs on counterterrorism, countering violent extremism, democratization, human rights, border control, and management. I would also like to note UNRWA's work to highlight challenges related to the return of foreign terrorist fighters and their associated family members, promote gender equality and women's empowerment, enhance cybersecurity, and counter the use of information and communication technology for terrorist purposes. I note that in our collective efforts to fight terrorism, it is critical that counterterrorism efforts conform to international law, including international human rights law, and support whole of society approaches that seek to prevent violent extremists and their supporters from inspiring, radicalizing, financing, and recruiting individuals to commit acts of violence, including on the internet. We look forward to continuing to strengthen our partnerships through a shared commitment to these principles and values. Thank you, and I wish you all a successful conference.
We thank Mr. Lemberg for his video address. The floor is given to Mr. Alexei Lizhenkov, the Deputy Director of the Department for New Challenges and Threats at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Please, Mr. Lizhenkov.
Уважаемый Абдулазиз Хафизович, большое спасибо за предоставленное слово. Прежде всего, позвольте поблагодарить вас лично и ваших узбекских коллег.
And your Uzbek colleagues for such an excellent organization of this conference. Terrorism can be countered effectively only by united efforts with the coordination, under the coordination of the UN, based on the international law, without hidden agendas and dual standards. And Russia have been always supporting Central Asian countries in fighting terrorism, which could be demonstrated during the events in Kazakhstan, which was under the attack of terroristic groups which had been trained in our work zones. And with the CSTO member states, Russia was quick to support Kazakhstan and was transporting other contingent of other CSTO member states to Kazakhstan. And we interact with Central Asian countries where the separate role is given to the contribution of Central Asian states in fighting terrorism, and we have the program for the coming years on counterterrorism, which envisages joint measures on fighting terrorism, and we have such a pioneering project as a counterterrorism office of the CIS, and the Anti-Terrorism Center allows for resoluting also some legislative implementation of our strategy. And with the ATC, the CIA states could develop common doctrine and agree on its implementation. Within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the ATC was also engaged in development array of documents, which include the Convention on Fighting Terrorism and Extremism, and also the Shanghai Document on Fighting Separatism. The regional anti-terroristic structures of the SCO conduct counter-terrorism exercises on a yearly basis, and also these exercises are conducted on internal border lines, also to prevent of free movement of foreign terrorist fighters. And here we here I should mention the international database of international terrorist fighters. The database, the bank, is structured on a voluntary basis, on the basis of information collected from the respective states. And the official languages of this bank is English and Russian. And as for February, besides international organizations, more than 50 organizations from 44 states were members of this bank. Talking about the anti-money laundering and financing terrorism, here we support the Central Asian countries, and mainly we cooperate. We have the cooperation between the intelligence units of the states, and also we support the initiatives on anti-money laundering. And only in 2022 we trained more than 1,000 officials from the Central Asian countries, which was done under the conditions of the COVID-19 pandemic. Russia initiated, within the measures on anti-money laundering, the research, which is being updated 3 times a year. That was about financing the ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and delegations of all the member states contributing to this research. And here I would like to invite your engagement to share any information which relates to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Mr. President, I thank you, participants. Спасибо большое, господин Ложенков. И здесь мы видим общую позицию наших стран по борьбе с терроризмом. Серьезнейшей угрозой нашего региона, который требует координации усилий на международном уровне. Уважаемые участники конференции, посредством совместных усилий при сотрудничестве с ООН и также ОБСЕ, совместный план по действию, по выполнению глобальной контртеррористической.
They are presented to your attention. I propose to adopt the Tashkent Declaration and officially launch to update Joint Action Plan. Thank you. I congratulate participants on adoption of the Tashkent Declaration and launching of the update Joint Action Plan. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we completed the opening ceremony. Once again, we express our sincere appreciation to all speakers. I'd like to thank all of you for our cooperation. Now I invite the delegations for a lunch, followed by 2 panel sessions afternoon. Thank you.